But it starts with recognizing like, this is what I can do. This is what I do have control over. I have control over my time, right? I have control over my attitude. Mm-hmm. I have control over, this small project, whether it's big or small, right? So I'm going to do these things really well. I'm going to do I'm going to be the best in the world at these things.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of A Higher Purpose of Vanderbloemen podcast. I'm your host, Brett Connolly, and she's back, the best, the one, the only, Sarah Gonzalez.
We're back. Happy 2025, you guys.
Man, we're so back.
We are so back.
New us, same bits.
Same bits.
We're workshopping some new bits.
Yeah, we're going to try and be cooler for you guys, but...
Gotta stay relevant. But I know we always say we're excited for our guests, but we're pretty
really
biased,
excited.
but we're really excited for this guest. He works at Vanderbloemen. It is Eugene Lee, who is the Director of Executive Search. He just brings just a depth of knowledge, strategic thinking, planning. He loves team development, has years of pastoral experience in different seats. And so we're really looking forward to diving into the conversation just as we're launching into a new year, figuring out goals and things of that nature. Yeah. We have a lot to cover.
We do.
Let's go. Well, Eugene Lee, you flew all the way from San Francisco to Houston just for this podcast. Thank you so much.
So kind of you.
I did. Thanks for inviting me.
It means a lot, honestly.
Yes.
But, we have a lot to unpack over the next few minutes. Of course, you're a really important person within the company. But also just on planet Earth, you've done a lot. You've served the kingdom well. And so we just want to kind of clear the runway just to hear a little bit. We've heard the intro, right? The Spark Note version, but we'd love to hear how you got to where you are today, understanding your calling a little bit. And then we'll just kind of pick at that and dive into other elements.
Yeah. Well, not a fancy story or anything, but I'd say really for the first 20 years of my life, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Like I was told what I was maybe good at, or, your parents always kind of tell you what they see you becoming. And, I wore that, and I, went to school, studied science, chemistry, thought I was going to move into like the healthcare industry, be a doctor, because that was my dad's dream, not my dream, but that's what they wanted.
Yeah.
And as I was going through college, I realized I didn't really have a passion for that. But I was just going down that track just because I thought I was supposed to. And after college, I ended up taking a little bit of time to do some reflection, travel the world, realized at that point my heart was in the church, in the local church. And I wasn't sure if that was me or if that was God or if it was supposed to be a combination. It was really unclear. Still not sure. So I decided I'm going to go study some more, get some more education. So I went to seminary, studied theology, church history, Greek and Hebrew.
Oh, wow.
And a couple of months into grad school, I got this youth pastor gig at a church just outside of Boston. And I was like, okay, these guys are going to hire me to, I'm just a few years older than the students that I'm, supposed to be mentoring.
Right.
And that was really the beginning of a 22-year journey of being in the local church.
Wow.
So I was a youth pastor for 5 years. And then friends and I, we got into church planting. We felt like, hey, let's start our own church and let's start it the way that we want to. And so we planted a church, and I got to be the pastor of that for 9 years in Boston.
Wow.
And then about 11 or 12 years ago, moved out to California, which is where I currently live, to work at another church in a campus pastor role, an executive pastor role. And so that was what I'd call maybe the second 20 years of my life. And not that I'm going to live my life in thirds, but now I'm in another season where over the last couple of years, I've been working here at Vanderbloemen. Cool. And that transition too was a bit unexpected, but when you look back, or at least when I look back, I can see, okay, I think God was preparing me for this opportunity, for this transition. And there were different things that I was doing in my regular job, in my normal life, and then things I was doing outside of my normal job that I look back and say, oh, that was preparing me for a shift, for a pivot. And so I didn't know it at the time, but now as I look back, I'm like, oh, that's what opened the door, at least kind of paved the way for me to move into executive search and consulting and working with churches and schools and nonprofits. So
I love it.
yeah.
Talk about a little bit about our audiences. Some of them are in that season of maybe they're going to school for something that they thought they wanted to do, or that their parents thought they wanted
are pushing
them to
on
do.
them. You know, yeah.
Talk about what that wrestle was like for you, that tension of making that decision and kind of just jumping into it. You had worked really hard on this specific degree.
Yeah.
What made you do that switch?
So I'd say a couple of things. I don't think that anything we work really hard on, even if it's not the outcome we want, is a waste of time or a waste of effort, because I still think we learn a lot through the things that we really commit ourselves to. And so I've done nothing with my undergrad degree. Like I have a bachelor's in chemistry.
Wow.
Never worked in a lab professionally, right? Never went into pharmaceuticals or med school or anything like that. But I look back and I realize there were a lot of things I learned about reactions, about how things go together, how things are created, breaking things down to very elemental parts, which was something that I learned through my, science degree. And I can apply that to a lot of different things now. Any problem that I'm facing, a challenge at work, an opportunity, how does this all work together? Like, how did we get here? Let's work backward. Let's break it down.
That's cool.
And so it's just looking back and saying, okay, that wasn't a wasted degree. I learned certain principles that I can use in different areas of life. And then I think the other thing I'd say is I didn't allow myself to obsess over what I thought I was supposed to do, but it was more about enjoying the journey of where am I going? And I often thought, how am I going to get there? But it wasn't so much about I have to be there specifically, whatever there is, like a job or like a place in the world or a certain status. It was more of this is the general sense of where I think I'm supposed to go and what I'm supposed to do. And then just enjoy the journey. The people that you meet along the way, the things that you learn, the failures and the mistakes that you encounter, which are always there, right? And then just realizing that that's developing me for something that, I may or may not know I'm going to need. But just recognizing, it's part of life, it's part of the journey, and just going with it. So,
I love that.
That's good. You say you've never used your degree, but I think we have great chemistry, Eugene.
That's really sweet.
Was that good? Okay. Let's just keep it.
Cut that.
We'll edit that out. So this is the first episode of 2025.
Yes.
Feels pretty good.
Feels exciting.
Feels pretty good. We're
Happy New Year.
We're back.
We're so back.
We're so back. Back in 2025.
That's really good. I just wanted to ask you quickly, when is the appropriate time to stop asking people or telling people Happy New Year?
That's a good
I've
question.
always wondered, when is it after 2 weeks? Do you stop saying that? Happy New Year. Is it after the first week?
I don't know what the answer is, but I just think that everybody probably has their own sort of internal sort of gauge,
Tension with that,
right?
sure,
I mean, I think
March.
if you haven't seen anybody in a while, I think you can go up to the beginning of February.
Yeah.
But if I see you every week, I can't keep saying Happy New Year, right?
true.
I mean, come on. It's read the room.
I have a couple of friends where it's an ongoing bit that we go deep into the year saying
you say Happy New Year?
How deep? What's deep?
Like March Madness, the brackets coming out, we're like,
And
Happy New Year.
Still say Happy New Year?
It's pretty good.
All right.
Pretty good.
I don't. Okay. Yeah.
But we're talking about New Year's resolutions. Yeah. Do you set those, or do you just kind of go with the flow, or do you have different markers, or say, hey, this category, I want to do this, or I want to be better in this avenue, or you just go, I'm not a big New Year's resolution.
It's just another month.
Yeah, it's always been a little bit of both.
Okay.
Some years I'm more focused and more intense, and I'm like, these are the 3 things I really want to do or become or achieve this year.
Yeah.
And other times it's just more like, I'd like to just get better at X, Y, or Z.
Mm-hmm.
And different things provoke those thoughts or ideas. A lot of it is reflection. I think back the past year and what were some things that I wanted to do that I didn't get a chance to, and so do I carry that over and then set a goal or a resolution. I always like to take care of myself, and so am I eating well? Am I exercising? Do I get enough sleep? Am I investing in my relationships? And again, going back to my science degree, I tend to measure a lot of things in my life, right? In chemistry, you measure everything, like how many grams is something, like how many ounces, and you mix chemicals together. And so for me, and I've got a group of friends that I do this with pretty regularly, we actually quantify the way we're investing in relationships.
Wow.
And so we'll say, how many times have I invested in this particular relationship? How many coffees or dinners or how much time spent with my wife or with my kids or with my friends? And we do that to, it's not really about accountability. It's just more of a, if that relationship's important to you,
Right.
you should be intentional about it.
Right.
And what does that look like? Like define important, define intention.
Yeah.
And so, certain years, like we'll get super nerded out and we'll put like targets or goals or, actual SMART goals to it.
Right.
And other times it's just more of a, hey, this year, I want this year to be better than last year. And so I'm going to be intentional about these areas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how I look at it.
Just some overarching goals.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like we were talking off camera of like sometimes we'll go in with these organizations and they have missions and vision statements and some of the questions even internally, they're like, I don't even know if our people know our mission and vision statement. And sometimes they'll know it, but it's so kind of 30,000 foot view. What does that mean? And I think sometimes we set these New Year's like goals and resolutions. They can be so ambiguous that we lose it after 2 weeks,
Right.
But I like the attainable goals and things along the way of, just me personally, I like a book goal, like how many books am I reading? My 3 energy really comes out when I have like a number to hit, and I'm like, okay, let me hit this. I got 4 more that I need to read here coming up. So I gotta fly back. I'm going to be reading some of Isaac's bedtime books and counting those.
Those count too.
It totally counts. It totally
Good
counts.
Night Moon, that counts.
It does. We read it 3 times tonight. Even better. Even better. But those, I think, physical thing, like when you're on the road, sometimes it's tough, as a consultant, but, just wanting to be better. And I have some of those that are a little bit more ambiguous where I'm not like, oh, I'm hitting these numbers or whatever, but it's like, maybe there's friends that I haven't talked to in a while. I need to be more intentional with them this year.
I like what you said about the intentionality side of it, because I think that it can get very, sometimes you're in the weeds when you write out like those 10 things and it's like, okay, finish this by the end of January and do this by March and do this, and it can get kind of overwhelming.
Right.
And also you don't actually know what life's going to throw at you every day
Absolutely.
or that next month. So for me, I love to ask for a word for the year for like I pray about it and ask for an intentional word. And that's been kind of what anchors me through those goals. Okay. But it really is more of like an intentionality thing. And so every time in whatever season it is, whatever I'm walking through in that year, I kind of get anchored back to that word.
Yeah.
And then kind of ask the Lord what he wants to teach me through that, what I'm supposed to learn through that. Because sometimes just those goals, I can get so caught in the weeds and then I get so disappointed in myself. And then I'm so hard on myself if I don't do it. But the intentionality, so for 2024, my word was expectant. And just to come with the expectation of what the Lord can do through my job, through my family, through mundane things, through friendships. And that's a cool thing to just get constantly thrown back to that anchor. And so that's been huge for me. My husband absolutely hates New Year's resolutions. I think it's because his family, he didn't grow up in a family that did it. My mom was the mom that like brought out the poster board and we like all wrote goals at the beginning of the year. It was like a fun event. But it is that overarching feeling sometimes of it's a lot of pressure to maybe write something that maybe you don't know if you can fulfill it, or the feeling of sometimes it can become a burden. If you write something that's like way out of reach, but you feel like maybe you should write it down anyways, just in case you get it done this year. So I love that you said intentionality, because I think that's the whole goal, right? If you're just trying to better yourself, to better relationships, to better yourself physically, anything like that, it really is the heart posture of the intentionality behind that drive to get those things accomplished.
And I like your example too, because some people like to say, I've got 10 goals and here, like I've got to do this in like 10 days or whatever. And I think what you're doing is similar but different, and it's probably more based on your personality to have an anchor or an idea or a word that anchors you just kind of day by day, week by week, month by month. And maybe you get 6 months down the road and you look back and you remind yourself, hey, I want to be expectant this year. Right. And I think a goal can do that. It can remind us, where do I want to go?
Absolutely.
Who do I want to be? Like, where do I want to go, this year? And so sometimes they're super tactical and they're measurable, and other times they're just more like a reminder of like, this is the posture I want to have this year. Or this is the way I want to live in 2025. So I really like that.
Talk a little bit about how so you said, you're 6 months in and maybe you have to reevaluate. How do you stay consistent and how do you stay motivated in being able to stay on task in either the goals that you set or just in general, like in your job, 6 months in, maybe in the year, you're like, this is a harder part of the season or this is a drier part of the season. How do you continue to stay motivated in those spaces?
Yeah, gosh. That's a great question. And I can't say that I'm always consistent with the way that I do that, but I'd say a couple of things. First, I'm also a 3 on the Enneagram. So I like to
Love that
feel
for
like
you
I'm
guys.
accomplishing things, achieving, like getting things done.
Yeah.
And so one way that I stay motivated is to keep track. It's like, am I making progress?
Okay.
You know, like, have I gotten closer to my goal? And to keep track just means you have to pay attention. Like, if the goal was, you know, this year I want to, you know, read 12 books, you know, well, we're 3 months in. Have I read 3 books? Right. And if I have, I'm feeling really motivated. I feel like I'm on track. And so that's one way. It's just to kind of keep track, to measure. And I think that's where it helps to be more specific.
Yeah.
You know, rather than just like, I want to read more this year. Okay.
That's right.
Right.
At the end of the year, you might not have read more this year. Right? But if you say, I want to read 12 books this year, 1 book a month. So that's one way to do it.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, I'd say don't obsess. Don't obsess over the goal. Don't obsess over the measurement, because let's say, you know, you're halfway into the year and you haven't read any books, and now you're just like turning pages for the sake of it. That's not enjoyable, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's not actually, you know, helping you, you know, enjoy literature or stories or books. You're just doing it for the sake of the goal. And so what I'd say is, like, let's say you're 6 months into the year or 6 weeks into the year and the goal's not working, recalibrate, throw it out, change it. Like, you know, move the goalposts, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
Like, make the goals work for you and not the other way around.
Yeah.
And sometimes you set them and you realize these aren't the right ones. And so I'd say keep track. And if it's working and it's encouraging you and you're motivated and inspired to pursue it, like, great, keep going. And if you've forgotten about it, either A, maybe it wasn't that important, or B, it's like replace it with something else.
Yeah.
And
That's
so I'd say
That's
just be
good.
flexible with it.
That's good.
Yeah. I think you start with exploring, right?
Totally.
And it's like, maybe you unpack something that you go, oh, I do like this, or you discover through exploring, this isn't my thing, and I
hate
think
this.
that should be okay, you know? And you talked about 20 years, and now like 70 years of being a consultant at Vanderbilt.
Right,
I think
right,
is what I think that's what the quote we have.
Careful there,
We'll go to
careful.
the tape. We'll go to the tape. But like, you have those moments of exploring, and maybe it's for a career, you know? And we have a lot of listeners that are starting in their career or in their career, and they're going, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
You know, talk to me a little bit about just practically when you went from, I have this degree, oh, now I'm in youth ministry, and then like I'm doing critical strategic planning, executive pastor at a multi-site church, to consulting. You know, talk to me about like the self-evaluation, because a lot of these young listeners are doing that in their own way of self-evaluating. Do I stay this course, or is it time to do a pivot?
And how do you know when?
We have tools to our tool belt, but do I continue this course, or do I change course?
Yeah, you know, I think speaking of words of the year, I think maybe these could be some words that can anchor or maybe even guide people. But one is definitely gratitude. And so it's really a lot of times we're unhappy, and so we think, okay, I'm doing the wrong thing, or I'm moving in the wrong direction, I'm in the wrong job, or I'm studying the wrong degree. And sometimes that unhappiness can really take us down the spiral where we just feel like I'm lost, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely guilty of that. There are times when I'm just like, oh, you know, how did I get here, right? And honestly, I think stepping back and just doing gratitude, like realizing, okay, I need to be grateful for actually, like, gosh, look at all these other things that I really appreciate that are going on in my life. And that helps ground me a little bit so that I don't feel like, you know, everything is falling apart. And then reflection, looking back, right? I think that's what reflection means. It's like, look back, where have you been? You know, like, what have you experienced? What have you learned? And then looking forward to say, how does this guide my next step or my trajectory or my future? And so when I've gone through career pivots, it's really been a combination of those things to say, hey, I'm really grateful for where I'm at and the people that are in my life and the experiences that I've had up to this point. And I reflect, gosh, this is what I've learned.
Yeah.
I'm learning more about myself. I'm learning more how to do things that I've never done before. And so how can I apply those things to what I might be interested in or where I want to go this next season or this next year of my life? And I try to put all those things together and just set like a roadmap, so to speak. Like, imagine 2 people in a car or 2 different cars, right? One person gets in their car and they're just going for a drive, right? Another person gets into their car and they're saying, I'm going to go to New York City, right? And after a couple of hours or a couple of days, ask those people where they are. And one person will say, I don't know, I'm just driving around, you know? And the other person will say, I'm halfway to New York City, right? And so I think like thinking about where you want to go helps. And then it helps kind of order your days, and it helps you to plan ahead. I'm going to need time. I'm going to need gas. Like I'm going to,
Right.
I'm going to need, this is where I'm going to stop along the way because this is how long it's going to take me. And so I think about like a career pivot. It's like if I want to go into ministry, or I want to go into marketing or consulting, or if I want to start my own business, it's a good goal to have. And then I think you've got to be intentional and say, well, what will it take me to get there? What have I learned to this point?
Yeah.
What do I not have that I need for that journey or to go in that direction? And how do I get that? Right. And I think when you put all that together, it could kind of give you a sense of, I think I'm moving in the right direction, or this is what I want to do. And a lot of it is you just go out on a limb. Right. And you have to be okay with making mistakes, taking wrong turns, getting lost sometimes. But again, speaking of goals, it brings us back. It recenters us. It says, okay, this is where I thought I was going, and I just need to recalibrate. Or this is where I wanted to go. I actually got a little bit off track. I need to get back on track. And so that's the power of goals and kind of setting kind of where you want to be, what you want to do. And I think that's what I've done with like career-wise, with big life choices, with like job choices. And, I don't think anything is ever final. I think everything is always evolving and growing and changing. And I think it's just embracing that.
Question I'd love to ask you is through all of those different changes and all of those pivots, a huge piece of that is usually some type of mentorship. Some bouncing wall that you've been able to say, is this right? Is this what I do? I know you have a wife and family, but what did that look like for you in seasons of you were maybe unsure of what was next or what was to come? What did it look like for you to seek mentorship, to seek wiser counsel? How did you find that in those seasons?
That is such a great question. So I'd say after being in the local church for 21, 22 years, pivoting out of that was not an overnight decision. That was something that I was thinking about. I was reflecting. I was journaling. And there were different concentric circles of groups and people that I really wanted their counsel. It definitely started with my wife. She knows me better than anybody, and she, has to put up with me. And so, like her feedback, her wisdom, like her direction is the most valuable. But then in concentric circles, my parents, again, I don't always agree. They don't always agree, but again, they know who I am. They were the ones who kind of have known me the longest, so to speak, right? And then I've got some amazing friends. So I remember during the pandemic, right? Like when we were social distancing and, some of my closest friends, we still decided, hey, we're going to be a pod together. We're going to be a bubble. We're going to get together. We're going to socialize. We're going to be safe together. But in our times, like I remember saying, hey, I'm going through a bit of a crisis. Like I don't know what I want to do next. And so I would share that with them. And literally, for a couple of years, they heard me process where I'd been, what I'd experienced. And I didn't know where I wanted to go, but they were helping me to figure that out. And so it was sort of a biweekly conversation where we were very intentional. And then you use the word mentors. I definitely called all my mentors. And, some of them are local, and so I could take them out to coffee. And others are not local, but it's easy to just get on the phone and say, hey, Kevin, I got a question. I've been thinking about this. What do you think? Or I've got this idea. And you reach out and, again, mentors are people who have taken a part in shaping who you are and helping you become the person that you are. And so they also have a certain insight, a vantage point, a perspective on you that's helpful to hear from them. And so definitely taking advantage of all of those relationships. So people who know you best, people who might have only known you maybe when you were a college student or when you were in grad school or in your first job. If you look back, I guarantee you, if you look back, you will remember that there were certain people that were just pivotal in those seasons of life. Like maybe it was a friend or a professor or an advisor, a mentor, a pastor. Like this person just really helped me in that season. Go back to them. Say, hey, I know it's been a couple of years, but I'm at a crossroads and you've been helpful to me before. I'd really love your thoughts on this. I'd really love your perspective. And that's golden. And you put all that together and it helps really shape or at least paint a picture
Right.
of maybe what you're thinking about, even if you're unclear about what you want to do. I think all those different brushstrokes help paint a picture of like,
Yeah.
I think this is what I'm being called into next.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, and obviously you didn't go, I'm going into ministry and I became an executive pastor, right? Like it's a journey. There's growth points.
Yeah.
There's even points of like, I thought I wanted to do this, but like this isn't the right ministry spot for me necessarily.
Right.
People are listening, whether they're in ministry or they're in nonprofit or business, wherever they may be. You're probably not starting in a C-suite position, And so talk to me a little bit about like being in kind of like an entry level position, but finding a space to lead. Like what's the give and take of leading and growing, because we're getting feedback on this generation coming in and it's like they're already looking over the fence and they want the C-suite position. They want to be fully remote. They want the whole layout, but that's not necessarily how it starts, So how do you lead from a seat where you're not necessarily the leader?
Yeah. I think you have to recognize at least two things. First, you have to recognize like there are just some things that you'll never have control over. And sometimes there are outcomes, there are decisions. You can't just do what you want. And so I think it's just recognizing that and putting that in the category of I have no control over this. There's nothing I can do to change this.
My
right?
nightmare, but
yeah. So maybe like if you're like a visual person, it's like drawing a circle and these are all the things that I don't have control over.
Right.
Like no matter how hard I try or what I say or what I want, like this will never change.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you could draw maybe another circle, have another piece of paper and write down, this is what I do have control over. This is what I can manage today. This is what I'm responsible for and I can get this done.
Yeah.
And I would say focus more on that because you can actually do something about it versus all the things that you can't even control, right? And oftentimes, I think if we focus on the things that you can do well, that are under your control, that are your set of responsibilities, it will slowly unlock the door to some of those things that you can't control, right? Some of those outcomes or decisions or like, I wish I had more influence in my company or in my job. Right. And maybe as a new person, starting in a junior role, you don't have influence. Well, you have influence over your job, right? Your day to day. And if you do those things really well and you can demonstrate success and faithfulness and hard work and determination, I think that opportunity to have influence in your job or in your company will start to appear, will increase. But it starts with recognizing like, this is what I can do. This is what I do have control over. I have control over my time, right? I have control over my attitude. I have control over, this small project, whether it's big or small, right? So I'm going to do these things really well. I'm going to do I'm going to be the best in the world at these things, right? And I think by doing that and being consistent in that, and if you think about that over days, weeks, months, years, decades, I think if somebody does have the ambition to be a CEO or to own their own company or to be, a certain type of influencer in their workforce, you don't get there overnight, but you get there by focusing on the things that you can steward, control, and really guide to completion. So I'd break it down to those two things.
That's really good.
And not just be like, what difference does it make? Why does it matter? I can't, I don't call the shots. Like, why should I care? Well, there are some things you should care about and care about those things.
A really big question that kind of brings up, which this is an impossible question. So no right answer, no wrong answer.
Okay.
No pressure.
But in what you just talked about, you're being so faithful with the small, you have all these big goals you can see ahead. You want to be in that C-suite. You want to start your own company, whatever that looks like. You feel like you've been faithful for a decade and nothing's changed. When do you know it's time to pivot? When do you know, okay, I thought I wanted this. This was a great goal. People have told me my whole life I'd be great at this, this, and this. I am burnt out and I feel like I've been excellent at the things I've done and I'm still not really sure where I'm headed. What do you do?
That is an impossible question.
It's impossible. I just kind of want to hear your take for it.
This is what I do. Let's say I'm going to just use your exact scenario. Like I'm doing the same job for 10 years and nothing's changed. I think what I'd do is I'd step back and I'd say, what do I want to change? Like, where did I think I was supposed to be in 10 years?
Yeah.
Right? Like, was that realistic?
Yeah.
And am I honest with myself? Is that something that I could actually do? Or is that something that I want to do or enjoy? Because 10 years is a long time, right? And so let's just say, like, I plugged away for 10 years. Like, I want to be able to look back and then look forward and say, do I still want this? And if I don't, and I'm just now realizing it, it's probably time for a change.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it's okay to think that way.
Yeah.
The other piece, too, it goes back to what we talked about just a second ago. It's like, ask other people.
Yeah.
Because you don't always know or see everything. And so let's say I've been doing the same thing for 10 years. I should have a conversation with my boss, like an honest conversation, and say, hey, Brett, you know, I've been working for you for 10 years. I've been bringing you coffee every day. I've been taking care of your dry cleaning, like, you know, whatever. It's like, I'd love to take on some more.
Yeah.
And maybe Brett is like, I've been waiting for you to ask, you know, or maybe he's like, what are you talking about? You know, and then I could say, okay, well, I think I want to work for somebody else, you know?
Right.
And so I think you can start with having that conversation and just say, hey, I'd love to do more. Like, I'd love to take on more. I'd love to help more, right? Not in an entitled sense, but more of like, I feel like I have more to offer.
Yeah.
Like, I think I bring more to the table. Now, I recognize sometimes that's not a safe conversation or a safe place, or maybe there's a reason why it's been 10 years and you haven't gone anywhere and your boss won't hear that out. Well, who are other people that you can talk to and process that with?
Yeah.
And maybe they're the ones that'll say, you know, Eugene, I've always thought you could do something else. Or I've been wondering why you've been there so long.
Yeah.
And they'll say that right word, or they'll say that right phrase that just plants a seed, or maybe inspires a new idea, or maybe the need to change or refocus. And so, again, I wouldn't keep that to myself. I'd share that with others. And I'd share that with a lot of people, again, who know me really well. Some people, whatever they say, take it with a grain of salt. And then other people, it's like, wow, I've never thought of it that way.
Right.
And put some thought to that and see if maybe it's time for a change.
Yeah.
Right. So I wouldn't do nothing. But I definitely have that conversation, you know, with your supervisor or with a coworker or somebody else, you know, in the place where you're working, and then other people who can help you figure out, do I do this another year or 10 years, or is it time for a pivot or a change?
Yeah.
And, you know, insight and perspective is really wise.
Yeah. That's a great answer to an impossible question.
Yeah. And I feel like people really respond well to people who are humble and hungry.
Yeah.
Like, if you're just humble and you're not hungry,
Right.
or you're just hungry and you're wanting to climb the ladder but you're not humble,
Yeah.
there has to be kind of both of those spaces that really resonates within like a culture.
Right.
And we ask every guest this like same question, okay? And this is kind of how we land the plane. But you talk about lessons learned along the way. You talked about setting goals each year. But as you kind of look back, you've talked about different seasons of even like journaling. And what do you know now that you wish like 20-year-old Eugene didn't know? Like, what's kind of one or two elements that you go, man, if I was 20 years old and I know what I know today, things could have looked a little different.
Oh my gosh. Wow. So there's probably a long list of things.
Yeah, let's go.
I'll talk about
We've
a
got
few
2 minutes.
things.
So I'm just
2
kidding.
minutes. Okay. All right. So a couple of things here. One, we're all going to fail. We're all going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
There are things that are just not going to turn out the way that we want.
Yeah.
And we have to embrace those too. Right? It's not just like, this is my dream job and I'm going to be happy. You know, it's like getting to your dream job is going to be a series of setbacks, U-turns, like mistakes. And I think we have to embrace those, because I think we oftentimes learn the most in those moments because we're humbled, or we're broken, or we're discouraged, and you know, we need to put ourselves back together. And so I think that's a great opportunity for anyone at any time in their lives, not just early in their career, but deep into their career. You know, I think mistakes and failures are just, they can be a gift, is what I'm saying. Now, sometimes we deserve them because we made mistakes and we weren't wise and we were foolish. But other times, again, we just didn't see it coming. It happened. What can we learn from that?
Right.
The other thing that's maybe related to that, but I would put in a different category, is feedback is your friend. And I think this has been a theme of what we've talked about today.
Yeah.
But I still, to this day, have a hard time with hard feedback, especially if it feels like criticism, right? But if I'm really, really honest and I take a deep breath and I really listen to what someone is telling me about something that I did or the way that I handled myself or the way that I showed up at work that day, I realize that in that feedback, there's always a kernel of truth and something I can learn from that feedback. And I don't have to reject it. I don't have to get defensive. I don't have to be in a bad mood about it. Like, it doesn't have to be like, nobody likes me, I'm going to quit, I'm no good. But like, what's the kernel of truth in that feedback or even in that constructive criticism? Hopefully it's constructive. Sometimes criticism is just negative and toxic, and you don't have to deal with that. But I think back, whether it's like feedback that I get from my wife, you know, or feedback that I get from my boss, or feedback I get from somebody that works for me, right? Like, I'm always like, hey, I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear what you think. I don't just say that to say that, but I realize that person will know things that I just don't know. And so I wish when I was 20, I was more hungry for feedback and I would solicit it more. I think now anybody who knows me always knows, hey, I want to know what you think. Tell me what you think. Like, you know, give me your thoughts. I want your feedback. It doesn't matter who I'm talking to because I just know that I'm limited. I don't know it all. I don't see it all. And there might be something that somebody else can give me that I won't be able to find myself. And I call that feedback. Right. And that can be a really good friend. So I'd say embrace disappointment, embrace mistakes, you know, setbacks, and then just be a feedback sponge. You know, just ask people for it. And not all feedback is helpful, but like I said, find the kernel of truth that's in that feedback and hold on to that.
It's really good.
I love it. I love it. That's so good. I feel like a lot of what today was self-reflection, like being able to reflect, ask mentorship, see kind of things for yourself, the people who know you, all those things. And that's so important. And especially to our audience and as we're starting a new year. So thank you so much, Eugene, for coming and having this conversation with us.
Yeah, this was so fun. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, and I do
2025.
That's right. And I do apologize because I lied to you. I said we do it like hot ones and there would be wings, but they're maybe next
No
episode.
food.
I was still waiting for those to be brought into the room.
I know, I'm
but,
so sorry.
You'll just have to have me back and
Part
fulfill
two.
that promise.
Come on.
I'm going to
2026.
embrace that setback. All right.
That's right. Some
I'm going to embrace it.
disappointment.
And it's only going to make me hungrier.
Yeah.
For the next
Maybe
one.
some humility.
Physically and
Yeah,
emotionally.
that's good.
Awesome.
That was
Thanks,
good.
Eugene.
Awesome.
Appreciate you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for listening to an episode of A Higher Purpose, a Vanderbloemen podcast. I really, really enjoyed today's episode with Eugene, getting to talk about all things goals, self-reflection, what that looks like in the new year. And so I hope that you guys have enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave us a comment anywhere on our socials. You can find us at A Higher Purpose Podcast. And if you want to listen to our other episodes, you can find us at ahigherpurposepodcast.com. We'll see you next week.